my dad came up and, I'm about to blend my protein shake or whatever. He said, son, like he put his hand on my shoulder. He's like, I tried doing all these muscle shakes and everything back when I was your age, and it didn't really work. I just don't think we have the genetics for it. And I just kind of stood there silent. People were doing the same workout program as me, getting results that were crazy, and I was lagging behind by years. And I just remember thinking, like, is this what normal feels like? I didn't know it then at the time, but the missing piece there would end up becoming one of the biggest missions of my entire life and the start of my personal growth. I was that kid who never really stood out. Always quiet, always in the background, the one who blended in with the room. Walking the high school halls just on my own. And I played video games instead of basically playing life, like RuneScape, Call of Duty, Quake 3 Arena, late nights on MSN Messenger, and like Ventrilo was the thing back in the day. Basically like early Discord style apps, but that was my world. I didn't have like full or even like facial hair growth, like no real confidence, no strong presence. And I was always that nice guy that's like, girls called sweet, but never like masculine. And I never thought about this until now, but I feel like back then I just didn't go through like puberty fully until I got my testosterone levels up like now. But now I'm getting ahead of the story. So let me take it back a bit. So back then, deep down, I think I knew something was missing. Not just like muscle or something like physical like that. Not just like motivation. Something biological and something hormonal that actually ties all of those things together. And I didn't know it then at the time, but the missing piece there would end up becoming one of the biggest missions of my entire life and the start of my personal growth. And it hit me one morning. So I was sitting on the toilet and I looked down at my sides and I could see there were just fat rolls. And I just remember thinking, like, this can't be it. This can't be who I am or who I've become. And that moment right there, that was one of the first times I started like trying to stop lying to myself. I knew I needed to make a change soon. But like anyone, I tried doing some dieting things and just trying to do better. But a week later, I was back to my old ways, just, double dipping at Taco Bell, doing all the bad stuff. And then, came this family photo at a chicken wing place, actually. And everyone in my family, they were flexing because they were going to the gym regularly. Everyone looked proud of their work. And I was just sitting there, by the side, and I was just kind of hiding behind a smile. Like I didn't know what pose to do. I felt uncomfortable. And I remember seeing that photo later and just thinking, like, man, everyone else looks strong. Like they take care of their body. Why don't I? And that photo kind of haunted me for like months, honestly, seeing who I became. And how I was no longer athletic. I was no longer like a skinny, like skater basketball kid. Then one weekend, my bandmates and I, we watched the movie Neighbors in the theaters, the movie with Zac Efron. And, there he was, like pretty lean, confident, and just looking effortlessly masculine. And I said, like, that's what I want to look like in my mind. And I think I even told them at the time, I'm like, I want a body like that. So that night, I made a promise to myself, not necessarily just to look like Zac Efron, but to basically just finally become the man that I was meant to be and start taking care of my body. And, not just for the success of my band, hopefully, but for myself as a leader and just feeling better in my skin. So I joined a rec center gym. I was scared. I was insecure. No clue what to do. So I showed up every single day, though, making some mistakes in the gym, but learning from them. Of course, I started lifting more. I started trying to eat healthier, making some mistakes, but I was trying to do all the typical fitness stuff, from bodybuilding.com type stuff. And, months went by. I still felt like I wasn't just myself. Like I didn't have that aggression. I didn't have that like fire and motivation. I just felt flat. People were doing the same workout program as me, getting results that were crazy, and I was lagging behind by years. And I just remember thinking, like, is this what normal feels like? And one of the things too, my dad actually came in one day. I was making a protein shake and I was being an idiot. I was putting like Reese's cups in my protein shake because I'm like, oh, whatever. But anyways, my dad came up and, I'm about to blend my protein shake or whatever with the Reese's cups. And he came up to me and he said, son, like he put his hand on my shoulder. He's like, I tried doing all these muscle shakes and everything back when I was your age, and it didn't really work. I just don't think we have the genetics for it. And I just kind of stood there silent. Like I didn't want to ingrain kind of this victim mentality, but at the same time I was like, I just got to keep going. I just got to keep being consistent and doing what I can. So, of course, then eventually I started learning about testosterone. The word most every guy hears, but no one actually understands. And I felt like I might have had a grasp on it, but, it wasn't until my human biology, like college class, where it actually clicked for me because I was doing all the workouts and all this stuff. And I realized, this wasn't actually just about muscle. Testosterone, is about energy, drive, and identity, and being that full masculine person. And the more I learned, the more it made sense. And everything I was missing, the motivation, the confidence, even the purpose, I believe was hormonal. Like, I think I was an introvert too because I just had low T, right? So eventually come across this YouTube channel called Doc Testosterone, and this is how I get exposed to Doc Farhan's content, and eventually just followed him for years, purchased some of his programs, like early on programs where there's like an orange background, and he had this like crazy like poofy hair, but I went through some of his programs and started learning a lot of really good stuff. And then eventually he did a webinar where he was exposing just a bunch of people and offering his group coaching. And that's when I jumped in on it with like 9 other dudes on that webinar call. And I'm like, I need to get in here and just see what I can do, because I knew there was like a mental shift just waiting to happen. And it, unleashed everything else biologically. But once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, this Doc Farhan character, going in with him on the coaching, I knew he was a neuroscientist, and he became like an older brother, like a dude who actually walks the walk and shows how he boosted his T naturally. And he looked at me and said, bro, you don't need TRT. You need discipline and consistency and the right protocols, the right lifestyle. And he showed me how the body can actually rebuild itself if you give it the right inputs, things like sleep, sunlight, minerals, movement, purpose, diet, everything, all inclusive. There's no shortcuts, no injections, just nature and effort. So of course, he coached me, and he just told me, he's like, I know you say you don't have sexual dysfunction or whatever, but get your blood test done. And I did. I went to a TRT clinic because I just knew, they'd be able to measure it. They know all the things. And he had me get all these other minerals and vitamins tested as well to see if, there could be interplay there on how to optimize. So we went like full root cause, and the dude was kind of like wondering, is like, what are all these other tests, because they don't run them there, because they aren't looking for root cause for low T. They're just like, oh, what's your levels? Inject. So yeah, like the dude was nice though. The TRT clinic guy, he did run the labs that I asked, and I had to pay maybe like $136 because it wasn't covered by insurance. But hey, he ran them, and eventually my results came back, and I got a call over the phone from a front desk lady, and it was not ideal. Like I felt like my testosterone might have been like okay, but I didn't know it would be quite so worrisome, because when the girl called me on the phone, she ended up saying, yeah, your testosterone levels are really low, and we need to get you in to talk to the clinician, the doctor. And so he came in, he gave me, the spiel or whatever. And he said, your free testosterone is so low that we can get you in for treatment as soon as next week. And I already knew Farhan, right? And I knew that this was achievable naturally to boost it, because that's what he did. And he documented it on his YouTube channel like crazy. So I was already on this purpose, and I knew it was possible to do this naturally. At least I felt like it. I had the hope, right? So I was like, no, like I didn't accept, basically. So I just went back to my normal life. I found out I had low T, and man, like it had like ripple effects from my relationship at the time all the way through the rest of my life. And I became obsessed because I had mid-level testosterone, like 536 nanograms per deciliter total, which is, mid. It's pretty low for especially my age and such, but my free testosterone was where I was really suffering. Like I had the total and free T levels of like the average 65-year-old man that just doesn't care about health, right? So I knew this was a big issue, and telling my girlfriend at the time that like I have the testosterone levels of the average like, senior citizen, it kind of drove a wedge in between our intimacy as well. So I became literally obsessed. I didn't even sleep that night because I knew this sex hormone binding globulin, this SHBG stuff, I need to know what this does. How can I fix this? And so, sure enough, I went through the rest of Farhan's coaching because we did the blood tests very early on. And, Farhan, he's like, no shortcuts, no injections. This is just about nature and effort. And months later, things were getting better, but I needed to see it on paper. So I got my labs done. I got them back, and my testosterone was climbing naturally. And I'll never forget what the TRT clinic dude said when he saw my results. He looked at my before and after, and he didn't remember me. And he's like, "You're just coming off a cycle, right?" And I was just kind of blown away, and I was kind of like smiling. I'm like, no, I actually did this naturally. Seeing my numbers on paper, my free T doubled. And that's when everything changed. I wasn't like chasing motivation anymore. It was chasing me, like I was just on my game. I had a purpose. I was full force, and my energy was higher. Of course, my confidence was real. I was much better at my job. My body started to reflect, the man I was becoming inside, with my workouts, my muscle gains, my fat loss. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need like validation, like external validation. I was just validated being myself. And, I was beyond just proud of myself just at the time, and knowing that number. And people at the time, also at metal shows, they were asking me to pick them up so they could crowd surf. And, I still kind of felt like I was weak on the outside, like people might have seen me like that. But after small little incidents like this, I realized that people saw me as a stronger person. And, that just made like a whole other difference. I realized this journey was never so much about testosterone alone, but it was about becoming aligned. And I truly believe when your hormones, your habits, and, your brain, your head syncs all up, you start to see what you're actually truly capable of. That moment when you look in the mirror and finally like recognize the person staring back is like that future self you've always kind of dreamed of? That was me, like for the first time. And I didn't just see the change, I felt it. Every rep in the mirror at the gym, I just was fully motivated. And, my body was stronger, yeah, but the biggest shift I feel was mental. Because this testosterone didn't just give me muscle or, fat loss. It gave me clarity, and it gave me that quiet confidence, the kind that really I just didn't feel like I had to prove anything to people anymore. Every rep, every meal, every early morning, it rewired my brain. Discipline became dopamine, and effort, started to feel good, as Andrew Huberman kind of says. And, that's when I understood something that I believe most men will never understand is you don't actually raise testosterone by chasing like pleasure and novelty. You actually raise it by chasing purpose. And the gym, of course, it became my temple. The sun became my supplement, and silence became my teacher, just, reflecting. And that's when life just started to flow for me, focusing a lot on diet as well. And eventually I just didn't become that shy kid anymore. I wasn't like that nice guy waiting for everyone's approval. I became the man who built himself, brick by brick, rep by rep, day by day. And that's how I help people now, because I truly know what it feels like to live disconnected from your own power. And I do know the way back as well, from, the ground up, the mental to the physical to the daily habits. So if you're watching this, you feel like you need that spark inside, that voice just whispers, there's something more in me. Listen to that, because you don't need shortcuts. You don't need injections. You just need that intention and that consistency, because when you build it naturally, you don't just raise your testosterone, you raise your standards altogether. And that's when I believe life truly gives you everything that you were meant to have. Like, this isn't just like a transformation story to try to get to the finish line as quick as possible. This is like a reminder that your body, your mind, and your purpose are all waiting for you to discover it. And looking back now, I realize this was never just about testosterone. This was about that truth, about finally aligning who I was inside with the man that I want to show the world. And because I believe when a man wakes up his biology, then he wakes up his entire spirit, right? And that's why I built everything I have today, the coaching, the community, the movement, along with everyone else in the academy. And this isn't just to like show off my lifestyle, not to sell some like dream, like about traveling, vacation, whatever, but this is about how to wake up men, because we live in a world that numbs men. It tells them to suppress, to obey, to settle, do the shortcuts. But when you learn how to live naturally again, like eating right, sleeping right, training right, breathing right, you realize how powerful you really are, how it's not so external. And this is what the journey has taught me. Masculinity isn't something you perform, it's something that you embody. And once you embody it, it changes everything. Your relationships, your business, your energy, your peace. And when you become aligned, you attract the life that you were meant to live. That's how I explain it. That's how I feel every single day. And that's why I stand beside other men, people like Doc Farhan, Coach JMO, Coach Mike, because this isn't just about my story either, right? And this is really like our story. It's like a brotherhood built on that truth, effort, and purpose. Like a reminder that strength isn't just found in like shortcuts, but it's about showing up every damn day and doing what is right. So this is how I went from, a quiet kid in Utah who never left my hometown for like 32 years to traveling the world, finding my purpose, living free. And I'm telling you, if I can do it, so can you, because you're not broken, you're just untapped. There's little obstacles put up. And once you start living with intention, once you build your body, your mind, and your hormones, everything just comes in sync and you just become unstoppable. So wherever you are right now, remember this, because the version of yourself that you've always dreamed of, that person's not a fantasy. That's a choice. And you make those choices every single day. And the moment that you decide to take that first step towards what you want, that's when your story begins. Because mine started with me eliminating all the victim mindsets, all the stupid stories I tell to myself about how I can't achieve something, and finally taking accountability for myself, my actions, my life, but doing it in the proper way, doing it in the way that I can get the most growth. And yeah, I believe a lot of people might look at my progress and be like, wow, this took you a long time to do. But because of all these obstacles, I'm much more able to help coach people, because I had so many obstacles come up for me, mental blocks, things that would detract from me actually following through with my progress. So because I had all these obstacles, I had so many issues that I had to work through and learn through, I'm better than most people who end up just having everything come easy to them, whether they're doing steroids or they just have good muscle genetics, or, you know, they were not super fat to begin with, whether they were not super weak and had everything handed to them. It's worth more to me because I had to work so much harder to do it. And this is truly the key. So if you're out there, take that step, take that chance. I believe deep down, you know what it's going to take. You just have to start, and that's it. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment down below if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. You know, I'm here for you guys. So I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.